Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads. I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks. And I have muffins that have just come out of the oven. They are blueberry banana and I really want one. So I'm making myself do this Friday Reads before I go over and do it. So it's going to be quick because I'm hungry. Okay, let me tell you about what I read last week and then I'll get into what I'm reading this weekend. And I'm going to start with Stupid Girl by Cindy Miles. This was narrated on audio by Elizabeth Evans, and it is the first book in the Stupid series. I don't know how many books are in that series, but I can tell you Elizabeth Evans was amazing on the audio. She would be narrating dialogue between the main characters, and they were a girl from Central Texas, I think, and a boy from Boston, and just the accents. She would just go one to the other, just like nothing. I was so impressed with that. I thought, man, she's good. She's a really good narrator. This is just your standard new adult story about a girl who is going to school for astronomy. That was one thing. In the book, they say astrology. And I don't know if that was a typo from Cindy Miles or what, but clearly she was studying astronomy. And so she had a very bad experience in high school where she was assaulted. And so she's dealing with that and people and being around people and doing the thing on her own. And then the boy is kind of a bad boy from Boston. He's got a reputation, grew up in the foster care system. He's got tattoos everywhere. He rides a motorcycle, yada, yada, yada. It's their romance. There you go, right there. Pretty standard stuff. I liked it okay. I thought it was good. It entertained me while I was listening, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. Prom Night in Purgatory is by Amy Harmon, and it is the sequel to Slow Dance in Purgatory. Yeah. What book was that? It is narrated by Emily Woo Zeller. I liked the narration, okay. It was largely unremarkable. I like Emily Woo Zeller's voice, and so while her, the narration of like the narrator speaking, you know, like the third person stuff, like anything that's not dialogue, was kind of monotone, and I can see where a lot of people would be just put to sleep by her voice, but I liked it okay. It didn't bother me, and so it was fine. This is the sequel to Slow Dance in Purgatory, and it is about a boy who is a ghost and a girl who falls for him, and he falls for her too, but he's from 1958, she's from 2011, I think. Amy Harmon tackles time travel in this, and I think she does it pretty well, but she avoids a lot of details, which then avoid a lot of problems that time travel stories fall into. So the ending is a little bit confusing. I followed it okay. It was fine, but I liked it in the end. I thought it had a good ending. You know, it was a very satisfying ending, so I was good with that. And I ended up giving that one 4 stars. Angel's Blood by Nalini Singh is book 1 in her Guild Hunters series. It is narrated by Justine, Eyre, who we all know I am not a huge fan of, and yet she was good. I sped her up to 1.5 the speed, and I keep saying this, but that whine in her voice gets eliminated when you speed her up, so definitely worth doing. This is a pretty popular adult paranormal romance series with angels, and it was good. I wasn't terribly invested while I was listening, and yet when I got to the end, I want the next book, you know, so it was good enough to keep me entertained. And so this is a long series, and I think I'm gonna like it. The romance was kind of rushed, but you know, like I say, it was entertaining and I was fine and I enjoyed it. And I have to say that her faults aside, the whine aside, Justine Eyre is a very good narrator. She's able to do the voices really well. So I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Then I picked up Starfall, which is by Melissa Landers, and it is the second book in the Starflight series. I loved this sequel. I loved the first book too, so I'm hoping she keeps it going. This, well, it's by Melissa Landers, and it was narrated on audio by Amanda Dolan. Amanda Dolan does a lot of YA books, and this is YA sci-fi. She has a very distinct sound, and I like it. So the narration was very, very good. Amanda Dolan doesn't go to great lengths to distinguish between the guys' voices. You always know who is speaking, but you don't hear a lot of distinction between their voices. So there's just enough, but that was okay. It's a misfit crew on a spaceship. Some people are after them. Usually bad guys are chasing them. In this case, it is a girl who is a princess. Basically, she ran away because her parents wanted to marry her off in order to form a political alliance, and she ran off, and her best friend ran with her. So it's their tentative romance, which largely stays in the background, actually. I say background. Well, it's just barely in the background, but it's a great, you know, I can't, should we, shouldn't we kind of situation. And the thing about this book is that the main character, this princess, thinks she needs help to get out of some situations that she's in, and she ends up being told, get yourself out. And she does. And she doesn't realize that she can. So when she does, she, you know, this is a revelation to her. It's like, wait a minute, I did that myself. And so other people remind her of that, and then she realizes it. And so that's a really good example for girls, especially girls in high school and YA readers in general who are women. Just that empowering thing. So I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I rounded it down to 4. I'm not sure why. It just didn't strike me as amazing, but you know, the more I talk about it, the more I like it. So I don't know, I may go back and change that to 5. Then I picked up A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Barnard, and I got this as an ebook. This is the story of a girl who is selectively mute, which is a disorder like any other brain disorder. And I say that because I have a brain disorder. It's you know, any mental illness is stigmatized. These days, we realize that everybody's brain chemistry works differently. So medication has been developed to alleviate the way that some of us, our brain chemistry doesn't work just right. I mean, and it manifests itself in like ways that we can't handle life. And so I identified with this right away. This is a high school girl who, she doesn't know why this happened, but she is unable to speak in some situations. And the way that it's played out, it seems like it's a very extreme case of social anxiety. This book goes a long way to describe very accurately what's going on. She really goes to a lot of trouble to describe what it is, but it's very natural, and it flows right in line with the story. And I highlighted so many passages, and I don't generally do that, but there were just so many places where she's talking about what's going on in her head. And so it's her journey to kind of work her way out of that. And again, one of those situations where she doesn't think she can handle things, and yet she does. And she looks at the situation and says, I was so incapacitated, and yet her parents and other people around her remind her, well, maybe at first, but you rose to the occasion and you handled it. Well, she has a romance with a boy who is deaf, and he's dealing with his own issues. He's very comfortable with who he is, and his family is, you know, no big deal. I mean, there is no distinction between him and a hearing person other than the fact that he speaks with sign language. So it's their relationship, and he has some insecurities, but not nearly as many as she does. But then the story is being told from her perspectives. Excellent book. I gave it 4 stars. And then last night I finished Simply Irresistible by Rachel Gibson. This is book 1 in the Chinook's hockey series, and it was narrated by Kathleen Early. I loved Kathleen Early's narration. I just think she pulled it off really, really well. The only thing about it was that there's a little 5-year-old girl who is one of the main characters, and she didn't really do that very well. I mean, she kind of got the intonation right, but she didn't get the range on a little kid's voice right, which I think is probably really hard. And it may well have been that she tried it and it just sounded so forced that she just didn't do it. So, you know, that was the only problem I had with the narration. Otherwise, it was really good. This is adult romance about a woman who is from the South, from South Texas, and she just is kind of feels like she's stupid, and the only way she's going to make it in life is to marry somebody really wealthy, or she goes to charm school and she does really well with that. So she relies on that a lot, and she is set to marry a very older, much older man, like 40 years older, and she bails. She leaves him at the altar. He owns a hockey team, and one of his hockey players is outside, and she says, please, please get me out of here. And so he does, and he is, you know, one of those guys that it gets approached by women all the time, and just, you know, it's like, look, no, I'm not going to fall for it again. And he has his own issues, so it's their romance.
But Sissy doesn't like Virgil. She thinks he's a lecherous old leprechaun. A real bad feeling tweaked the back of John's neck. Isn't Sissy the bride? She stared at him with her big green eyes and shook her head. I am. That's not even funny, Georgianne. I know, she wailed. I can't believe I left Virgil at the altar.
I liked the story a lot. I liked these characters, and I think a lot of people who have reviewed this book don't like him because he's selfish and kind of full of himself and clueless. He's a typical man, and beyond that, he's a big, strong hockey player who, you know, goes out on the ice and knocks into people and beats people up. So, you know, you have to expect some of that to bleed out into his character in the way he lives in real life and treats everybody, not just women, but everybody. I was fine with it. And just to see the way that he changes, I think this handled one of the situations in a very realistic way. And so in the end, it probably gets a bit fairy tale-ish, but I love that. I love that kind of thing. So it was great. I loved it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Right now, I have picked up, I really do need to bling these things up, don't I? So it looks like jewelry around my neck or something, because I always have them on. But I am listening to A Trail Through Time, which is book 4 in the Chronicles of St. Mary's series by Jodie Taylor, and it is narrated by Zara Ramm, who is fantastic. I love this series. It's all about time travel, and I've talked about it before, and you know, it's funny, it's dry, it's witty, it's clever, it's historical, and it, you know, thoroughly enjoyable. So I'm glad I picked it up. Actually, I think that after the romance, although I prefer to have some romance, I feel like, nah, let's break it up a little bit and have some sci-fi in there. So doing that. Don't know what I'm going to pick up after that, but I'm sure I'll tell you about it next week. So if you've read any of the books that I read last week, let me know what you thought of them. I always love talking to you in comments. And that is it for now. I got to go eat one of those muffins because they smell so good. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.